Man Spider. On Earth 51412, Patton Parnell was a disturbed young man who lived with his abusive uncle Ted, experimented on animals in his free time, and made a habit of perversely spying on his neighbor, Sarah Jane. One day, during a trip to Alcorp Industries, Sarah Jane actually approached Patton and asked for his help exposing the company's illegal animal experimentation. Sarah Jane then pulled Patton into a lab to free the test animals. However, distracted by a huge red spider, Patton reached out to grab it and got bitten. Afterwards, security caught him, dragged him out of the building, and sent him home. The next day, Patton was having feelings of intense hunger but couldn't keep food down, so he impulsively ate a mouse, which became the first moment he encountered his spider-like abilities. He then tried eating a cat and discovered he could produce webbing. As he filled the house with cocoons, his uncle Ted came home. Immediately, Patton completed his transformation into a spider-like monster and attacked his uncle. Patton briefly considered using his powers for good as a superhero, but dismissed the idea as boring. Sarah Jane, meanwhile, had been researching the spider that had bitten Patton and then went to Patton's house looking for Jean, the missing school bully of Octavius High School. Patton encountered her and kissed her before then biting her neck. She slapped him, and he once again transformed into the monstrous spider creature before revealing that the bite he had just given to Sarah Jane implanted eggs in her, an ability he had already used on his uncle and a boy from the neighborhood. He declared a twisted love for Sarah Jane, but before he could do more to her, the multiversal spider totem hunter Moreland appeared and drained Patton's life force. Sarah Jane then fled, but the next morning, baby spiders would emerge from the bite marks on her neck. Darkhold Spider-Man. One day in the main Marvel universe of Earth 616, the demon Chthon was able to retrieve the Darkhold, a book of dark magic, and used it to unleash something known as the Unraveling. Sent out from a place called the Other Realm, the Unraveling caused matter within the realities it touched to gradually decompose. Seeing how dangerous this was, the Scarlet Witch put together a team of heroes to stop Chthon. Following this, on Earth 73640, Spider-Man had a backstory similar to the mainline Peter Parker's. However, in this world, Gwen Stacy never died, and as a result, the two of them were eventually married. This world's Spider-Man was on patrol when the Unraveling hit, causing everyone in New York City to slowly and painfully crumble apart. Spider-Man tried to hold the city and its people together by covering everyone and everything in New York in his webbing, and it actually worked. For a while. But the web slowly dissolved over time, forcing him to constantly re-web the entirety of the city. As the stress of this wore him down and his sanity deteriorated, he also became vulnerable to the corrupting influence of the Darkhold. In desperation, he turned to Reed Richards for help. Reed suggested fusing his webbing with the Venom symbiote, since it would hold up better than standard webbing. Spider-Man tracked down Venom, finding the symbiote in a weakened state as it was bonded to the corpse of Eddie Brock. He managed to subdue it and fuse it with his webbing in Reed's lab, using the upgraded webbing to keep the city together, but by the time he realized how late he was getting home that day, he rushed back to find that Gwen Stacy had fully succumbed to the Unraveling. Sometime later, Peter went to Reed's lab. Reed had already heard about Gwen's death and offered his condolences, but Peter suddenly injected him with a chemical that knocked Reed unconscious. Peter then fused his webbing with Reed himself, since Reed's stretchy body proved even stronger than his original webbing or the symbiote-enhanced version. With this upgrade, he bound the entire city once more, condemning his former friend to an existence of constant pain and torment in this process. Even though it caused Reed endless suffering, the webbing worked. The city's people were able to live something close to a normal life thanks to how strong and durable it was. Reed repeatedly begged Peter to free him from the agony, but an increasingly unhinged Peter told him his new job was to keep the city stable. Patient Zero. On Earth 11080, the Punisher accidentally released Survivor 118, a chemical created to help people adapt to a post-apocalyptic environment. After the contaminant spread throughout New York City, Spider-Man was the first to show its effects, consuming the Rhino on live television. The Fantastic Four quickly subdued him and put him in quarantine for study. Reed Richards assembled a team of scientists to figure out what caused Spider-Man's sudden change, and they soon discovered the chemical had altered his DNA, turning him more predatory and giving him a craving for human flesh. Ben Grimm was one of the first Beyond Spider-Man to succumb to the plague, and for reasons that remain unclear, he freed Spider-Man from his cage. Following this, the infection continued spreading until the world collapsed, as heroes and villains alike turned into rabid cannibals, until only the Punisher remained to stand against them. A turf war eventually broke out among the cannibal tribes. Spider-Man, now called Patient Zero, proved the most successful of the tribe leaders, taking control of Manhattan while other tribes moved to claim new territory. The Kingpin, now known as the King of Death, built his own power by wiping out rival tribes and soon brought his forces into Manhattan to challenge Patient Zero. He killed many of Patient Zero's people and managed to capture his mate, Mary Jane. Desperate to save her, Patient Zero turned to the Punisher for help, offering him information on hidden survivors and a promise to leave them alone in exchange for killing the King of Death. Frank was hesitant at first but agreed, setting out with Patient Zero's tribesmen Deadpool, Black Widow, and Scorpion to hold up his end of the deal. After facing some difficulties, the Punisher won and brought Mary Jane back, but as Patient Zero celebrated, Frank shot him point blank in the head, ending Patient Zero's life. The Spider. Peter Benjamin Parker is the main character of The Spider, a 2024 short horror film from Locust Garden Pictures. During a visit to a lab, Peter was distracted by scientists at work when a radioactive spider bit him on the hand. Later that night, he was outside in an alley examining the bite when two robbers ran him over. One suggested robbing him while he was unconscious, while his partner doubted someone so young would even be carrying a wallet. The first robber tried anyway, grabbing Peter's hand, only for Peter, now empowered by the spider bite, to accidentally tear the skin off the robber's hand. Dazed and confused, Peter returned home to wash the blood off his hand, only to discover his hands now stuck to any surface they touched. He then tested his new agility by leaping from roof to roof around his neighborhood until he began to feel ill. Back in his bedroom, he vomited, assuming it was just shock from the experience. But looking in the mirror, he noticed one of his teeth was missing, and on closer inspection, he realized all of his teeth were rapidly falling out. Overwhelmed by the shock and pain of his own transformation, Peter passed out. Later, now at school, Peter's teacher and fellow student Gwen woke him as he slept in class, and upon waking up, he was bleeding from the nose and had liquid oozing from his mouth. His teacher tried to keep things calm, but Peter cried out in pain and passed out again. He woke up in an ambulance where a paramedic attempted to talk to him. Peter looked down and saw his own hair stuck to his hand, which sent him into a panic. He began seizing, and as the paramedics tried to hold him down, a spider-like arm burst out from his shirt and killed both of them. Now in mid-transformation, Peter locked himself in his room to avoid hurting anyone. Uncle Ben, unaware that Peter was behind the recent spider power incidents reported by J. Jonah Jameson, tried to talk to him, and Peter tried to warn him away, but Ben entered Peter's room anyway, despite noticing blood on the door handle, and Peter lost control and killed him. Later, Aunt May returned from shopping, finding Peter's door half open. She stepped in and found the room covered in webs, and her nephew, now more spider than human, eating Ben. In the post-credit scenes, Mary Jane Watson is seen fleeing through an alleyway, presumably from Peter, as the fully transformed spider ambushes her and devours her. The Goblin. On Earth 2120, Peter Parker's life closely mirrored that of the mainline Spider-Man up until the death of Gwen Stacy. Consumed by grief, this Peter crossed a line his mainline counterpart never did by killing Norman Osborn, and as a result gave up being Spider-Man for good. Rather than walking away entirely though, he took Osborn's weapons and gear and made them his own, repainting them and becoming a new version of the Goblin. A Spider-Woman from a different dimension who was a variant of Gwen Stacy tried to recruit this Goblin Peter into a growing team of spider heroes being assembled to fight off a threat called the Inheritors. He turned her down at first, but changed his mind once he learned who she really was. Not long after joining, he sacrificed his life to save hers, since it was something he'd been unable to do for Gwen before. Chasm. In the main Marvel universe, Ben Reilly is a clone of Peter Parker, created by the villain Miles Warren, otherwise known as the Jackal, to torment Peter. Ben seemingly died in their first encounter, but he actually survived and spent 5 years in exile, only returning to New York after learning Peter's Aunt May was ill. After reconciling with Peter, Ben fought by his side as the Scarlet Spider. For a time, Norman Osborn manipulated events to convince both men that Ben was the original Peter Parker and Peter was the clone. Believing this, Peter left New York with his wife Mary Jane Watson, leaving Ben to take up the role of Spider-Man. Later, during a battle with Osborn as the Green Goblin, Ben was fatally impaled and died in Peter's arms, with the truth finally revealed that Peter had been the real Peter Parker all along. Ben was later resurrected by Miles Warren, who spent years repeatedly killing and reviving him to perfect his cloning technology. This drove Ben mad, and he eventually broke free and took Warren's place as the new Jackal. He founded New U Technologies, hoping to use cloning for good, but the plan went wrong and Spider-Man was forced to stop him. Still seeking redemption despite his fragile mental state, Ben relocated to Las Vegas and returned to his role as the Scarlet Spider. Eventually, Ben took up the Spider-Man mantle again, this time as a corporate-sponsored hero for the Beyond Corporation, in exchange for being reunited with his long-lost lover. When Ben tried to expose the company's secret manufacturing of supervillains, its head, Maxine Danger, had half his memories wiped to keep him under control. Already unstable, Ben became paranoid and distrustful. Then, during the collapse of Beyond headquarters, Ben was submerged in a mutating psychoactive polymer. He should have died again, but instead emerged with most of his old personality erased, and a new purple and black appearance, with a new identity as well: Chasm. As the villainous Chasm, Ben became vengeful and bitter toward Peter, now wanting to steal his memories and life. He partnered with Madeline Pryor, a clone of Jean Grey, who had become ruler of Limbo, a demonic pocket universe, since the two were united by their shared situation as flawed clones chasing stolen memories. During the Dark Web storyline, Ben stole Madeline's scythe and briefly ruled over Limbo's demons, transforming into a hulking, winged, horned version of himself, but he eventually lost the scythe, and with it, its power. He was then confined in the Limbo Embassy, a gateway between Earth and Limbo in New York City, before ultimately escaping. Kaine Parker. Kaine Parker's existence began as the Jackal's very first attempt at cloning Peter Parker. The cloning process appeared to work perfectly at first, but a flaw in the creation process caused Kaine's body to become increasingly deformed over time. Alongside the physical decay, he also grew mentally unstable. Rather than end the experiment, the Jackal kept Kaine alive purely to observe how long he could survive in this deteriorating state, and Kaine ended up surviving far longer than the Jackal ever anticipated. Believing he was a failure compared to Ben Reilly, who turned out more stable, Kaine spent years wandering as a violent drifter, oftentimes working as an assassin. He was haunted by broken pieces of Peter's memories, which he mistakenly believed were his own, and this confusion led him into repeated conflicts with both Peter and Ben, usually as an antagonist, though his actions were typically driven by confusion and self-loathing rather than genuine malice. During the Spider Island storyline, Kaine underwent another mutation, transforming him into a monstrous creature called Tarantula. He was eventually cured, and the cure not only restored his human appearance, but also permanently removed the degeneration that had plagued him for most of his life. With a fresh start, Kaine left New York City and relocated to Houston, Texas, where he took on a new identity as the Scarlet Spider, protecting the city as a more brutal and violent version of Spider-Man. Superior Spider-Man. On Earth 616, when Otto Octavius was dying from a terminal illness, he devised a plan to swap minds with Peter Parker, intending to leave Peter trapped in Otto's dying body while Otto took over Peter's young and healthy one. This experiment worked, but as Peter lay dying, he secretly used a mental technique to pass all of his own memories and experiences into Otto's mind. As a result, Otto ended up in full control of Peter's body, but now carrying Peter's complete memories along with his own. Intending to become a superior Spider-Man to Parker, Otto took up the mantle of Spider-Man. Now known as the Superior Spider-Man, Otto initially kept his own harsh, self-centered personality even while living Peter's life. He fought crime with brutal efficiency, relied on surveillance systems and robotic drones, and had little of Peter's usual restraint or humor. Over time, though, Peter's memories and values began to shape Otto's actions, gradually pushing him toward real heroism, a protective instinct towards Peter's loved ones like Aunt May and Mary Jane, and a growing sense of responsibility much like Peter's own. While living Peter's life, Otto finished Peter's doctoral work, founded Parker Industries, and started a relationship with Anna Maria Marconi, a fellow student at Empire State University. Yet, although Otto had initially wiped out Peter's lingering consciousness, Peter's mind eventually started to resurface. Then, during an encounter following Norman Osborn emerging as the Goblin King and threatening Anna Maria, Otto came to realize that Peter is, in fact, the superior Spider-Man, and willingly gave him back control of his body, seemingly killing Otto. However, a digital backup of Otto's mind survived, and it eventually took control of a robotic body called the Living Brain. Later, using cloning technology from the Jackal, Otto transferred his digital mind into a new body made from a mix of his and Spider-Man's genes, eventually taking on the identity of the superior octopus. Doppelganger. Doppelganger was an evil, nearly mindless clone of Spider-Man created by the villain Magus during the Infinity War conflict. Using strange duplicating bodies called M-bodies, sourced from a being named Anthropomorpho, Magus produced many such evil copies of heroes, and this version of Spider-Man was one of them. Doppelganger is a hulking, fanged creature with multiple extra arms and clawed hands. It shares Spider-Man's core abilities, but its strength far exceeds his. While Spider-Man can lift around 10 tons, Doppelganger can press roughly 65 tons, along with having superhuman agility, stamina, reflexes, and speed. It can also fire razor-sharp webbing and cling to walls. Despite all these powers, it has only ever shown animal-level instinct rather than true human intelligence. Doppelganger was killed during the Infinity War by Hobgoblin, but was later brought back to life through magic by Demogoblin. When Magus was ultimately defeated by Adam Warlock, ending the Infinity War, all the other doppelgangers were destroyed, but the Spider Doppelganger survived because Demogoblin's magic had created a psychic link between the two of them. Doppelganger later joined Carnage, Shriek, Carrion, and Demogoblin during the notorious Maximum Carnage killing spree. During this time, Shriek became something of an adoptive mother to Doppelganger, which made him more dangerous since he would follow any of her commands. When Carnage eventually turned against Shriek, Doppelganger stepped in to defend her, and Carnage responded by stabbing him and throwing him off a skyscraper. Even so, Doppelganger has managed to return several times, consistently undergoing death and resurrection time and again. Spidercide. Spidercide is another clone of Peter Parker created by the Jackal, and this clone turned out to be the Jackal's final successful attempt at replicating Peter. Following its creation, the clone was kept in a stasis pod to hold him in suspended animation until the Jackal needed him for some undetermined future purpose. When he finally woke up, Spidercide was convinced he was the original Peter Parker. He tracked down Peter's wife, Mary Jane Watson, and tried desperately to make her believe his claim. This drew him into conflict with the real Spider-Man along with his other clones, Ben Reilly and Kaine Parker. Unbeknownst to Spidercide, the Jackal had wired a hidden failsafe programming into his body. Once Peter, Ben, Kaine, and Mary Jane were all in the same place at the same time, that programming triggered, unleashing shape-shifting powers and warping him into a monstrous form. In the fight that followed, Kaine killed Spidercide, but the Jackal secretly retrieved his body following the conflict and brought him back to life. Once Spidercide stopped denying what he really was, he fully embraced being a villain. At one point, he helped the Jackal steal an airborne version of the carrion virus over the town of Springfield, Pennsylvania, killing more than 2,600 people. He later turned on the Jackal, betraying him to a mysterious figure called Scryer, who turned out to be part of a secret organization loyal to Norman Osborn. In return for the betrayal, Scryer removed the genetic deterioration built into Spidercide's cloned body, the same flaw that had caused other Spider-Man clones to physically break down over time. Spidercide later returned as an enemy of Ben Reilly, but their conflict ended with Spidercide using the last of his strength to actually save Ben's life in an act of brotherhood. His remains were then taken for study by Dr. Ashley Kafka. Over the years, Spidercide kept coming back to life and reappearing in various Spider-Man stories, regularly clashing with Peter, his fellow clones, and the Jackal. Flash Thompson Spider-Man. On Earth 18139, history followed the same path as the main Marvel universe up until Peter's famous spider bite. In this universe, it was Flash Thompson, the high school bully of Peter Parker, rather than Peter himself, who got bitten by the spider, gaining spider-like superhuman abilities as a result. Flash first put his powers to use as a professional wrestler, performing under the name Spider-Man at RKP Palace. One night, he helped a security guard catch a burglar, and after that, he chose to become a full-time superhero, even dropping out of Midtown High School to focus entirely on heroics. As a result, Flash wasn't around to save John Jameson when he needed rescuing, and J. Jonah Jameson believed his son John's death was the result of a government cover-up, leading to the Daily Bugle starting to back vigilantes like Spider-Man. Even so, the public soured on Flash Spider-Man because of his violent tactics, which Peter Parker had captured on film. One day, Flash came home to find Peter waiting for him in his trailer. Peter was there to ask for help retrieving ISO-36, a rare radioactive isotope that had been stolen by the Master Planner and that could cure Aunt May's blood cancer, but Flash, overcome with rage over Peter turning the public against him, punched Peter, accidentally killing him. Shaken by what he'd done, Flash set out as Spider-Man to prove to himself that he could still be a hero. He tracked down the isotope, but during his fight with the Master Planner, he knocked out a support pillar and brought the building down on himself. He managed to escape the wreckage, and as a result of this experience, he realized he wasn't a hero, and rather was a bully. He delivered the ISO-36 to Forest Hills Hospital so Aunt May could be cured, then gave up being Spider-Man for good by confessing to killing Peter and turning himself into the police. Werewolf Spider-Man. On Earth 7085, nearly every Marvel character exists as a bloodthirsty, flesh-eating werewolf. Ash Williams from the Evil Dead franchise once stumbled into this reality on accident, and among the werewolf versions of Marvel heroes native to this world was Spider-Man, reimagined as Spider-Wolf. Spider-Wolf was later one of several spider heroes pulled into Earth 31913 by the Spider God. Alongside other summoned spider heroes, he joined a team called the Web Warriors to help that world's native hero, Webslinger, defend his reality from an invasion of symbiotes. Webslinger was initially wary of Spider-Wolf, doubting he could keep his werewolf instincts in check, and even attempted to kill him. But Spider-Wolf eventually won his trust by saving his life, and the two went on to work together to save the world. Spider-Wolf went on to have more adventures across the multiverse, eventually joining Miguel O'Hara's Spider Society. Bullet points. On Earth 7105, Peter Parker's uncle Ben Parker was killed during World War II while trying to protect Dr. Abraham Erskine. Peter's parents died as well, so he was raised by Ben's widow May. Without Ben around to teach him the importance of responsibility, Peter grew up angry and rebellious, becoming something of a troublemaker in the 1940s. During a field trip to a desert base, Peter snuck off with friends and went joyriding in a stolen Jeep. When the Jeep broke down, he went looking for fuel and accidentally stumbled into a test site right as a gamma bomb went off. He recovered from the explosion, made it home, but his two friends later confronted him, blaming him for getting them into trouble. Peter's anger triggered his transformation into the Hulk, who went on a rampage. Police arrived to confront the Hulk, and Aunt May recognized him as Peter, which triggered a heart attack. Distressed by what had happened to May, the Hulk fled the scene. Following Peter's transformation, the recently retired Steve Rogers was called back into service, this time wearing the Iron Man armor, and tasked with capturing Peter. Peter had gone to say goodbye to Aunt May in the hospital before planning to run away, but was confronted there by Iron Man and a group of army troops. Peter refused Rogers' attempt to calm him down and transformed into the Hulk to face Iron Man. Their fight outside the hospital dragged on until the Hulk ultimately killed Iron Man and, realizing what he'd done, Peter fled in terror once again. Sometime in the future, when Galactus arrived on Earth, the Hulk came out of hiding to attack him, but was killed after being struck by the power cosmic. Peter's brave death moved the Silver Surfer to turn against Galactus and fight him, eventually driving him away from Earth. Peter was then laid to rest next to Steve Rogers. In the same universe, Dr. Bruce Banner, who had helped invent the Gamma Bomb, had felt personally responsible for Peter's transformation. He dedicated himself to researching the Hulk's origins and had concluded that he needed a blood sample from Peter to develop a cure. But when he brought this plan to S.H.I.E.L.D. director Reed Richards, he was turned down since S.H.I.E.L.D. couldn't risk losing Banner in an encounter with the Hulk. Frustrated, Banner returned to work and began dissecting a spider that had survived the same blast that transformed Peter. The spider bit him, altering his DNA, and because he was bitten as an adult, his body couldn't handle the change, leading to his own rampage as he broke free from the military installation and then evaded S.H.I.E.L.D. for 2 years. After being captured and undergoing years of gene therapy and heavy medication, Banner eventually became S.H.I.E.L.D.'s newest recruit, now known as Spider-Man. Man Spider 6078. On Earth 6078, Peter lived a similar life to his mainline counterpart up to the death of Uncle Ben, as in this universe, Aunt May died in a sudden accident, while Uncle Ben survived. With May gone, Peter found himself worrying about the family's finances and how he would help keep them afloat, so rather than give up his costumed wrestling and show business career, Peter proposed a practical solution to his uncle. Ben would act as his agent, while Peter kept earning money through his wrestling and entertainment appearances. This arrangement let Peter cash his checks in through Ben rather than risk exposing his identity as Spider-Man by handling the money himself. With this came newfound success, and as a result, Peter's ego grew. He became arrogant and used his powers mainly to show off and earn money rather than take responsibility as a hero, leaving other heroes to handle the villains who might otherwise have crossed his path. Eventually, he moved out on his own, continuing to send Ben a portion of his earnings, but by that point it had become more a matter of routine than a genuine sense of care or obligation toward his uncle. Eventually, the machinations of a future version of the Hobgoblin caused Uncle Ben to be transported into the mainstream Earth 616 universe. This displacement set off a chain of events that 20 years later culminated in Spider-Man transforming into the monstrous Man-Spider. In this horrifying new form, Peter fought and even managed to kill the Avengers. Dark Ages Miles Morales. On Earth 80763, Miles Morales had a similar backstory to that of the mainline Miles Morales. However, a powerful machine known as the Unmaker emerged, and although the threat was eventually stopped, a portal left open by this world's Doctor Strange during the battle released an EMP blast that knocked out technology across the planet. Miles survived the fallout of this event and would live on as society worked to rebuild in its aftermath. At some point during the early rebuilding period from this apocalyptic moment, Miles bonded with the Venom symbiote and the two formed a working partnership. That changed when the Carnage symbiote forcibly bonded to him as well, corrupting Venom in the process. Together, the two symbiotes overpowered Miles, taking control of him as their host, and struck a deal with the mutant villain Apocalypse. They would serve him in exchange for a spaceship that would let them flee Earth before the Unmaker awakened once more. Under Apocalypse's control, the symbiote-possessed Spider-Man was sent to stop a group of survivors after Quicksilver had warned them about the villain's plan. When the group reached Europe, Miles attacked them and tried to kill them until Virginia Potts used fire against him. This broke the Venom and Carnage symbiote's hold on Miles, and Storm finished the job by destroying the symbiotes with a blast of lightning. Freed and back in control, Miles explained that Apocalypse's scheme involved seizing control of the Unmaker, and then explained how he ended up as Apocalypse's puppet. The group then traveled to Paris, and during the battle against Apocalypse, Apocalypse's ally Dracula betrayed him and turned him into a vampire, leading to Blade stepping in and killing both Apocalypse and Dracula. What other lore videos would you like to see? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to the next video with all of you.